But we need to talk about this conversation that Anna Kasparian had about criminals and them being released early, violent criminals, the police state, punishment, all that kind of stuff. We need to get into that. There are key factors that I feel was left out of this discussion. And I think that if Anna Kasparian would have had this discussion with someone who is for police abolition, someone like the founders of 10 Demands for Justice, like Nick and Awkward and Zoya and all of them, I think she would see this a little bit differently. But this is why it's important to have those discussions. Let's go ahead and get into the clip here. Actually, before we get into this clip, I do want to preface by saying this. I'm not saying what the individual here who was arrested, I do not agree with what he did. I want to make that very clear. That being said, we need to talk about some of the things that are said here in this episode and what is left out and why you need to know about it. So let's go ahead and get into that.
3 suspects have been arrested for their alleged role in a botched robbery where a Monterey Park, California police officer was shot and killed. That was the result of this botched robbery. So 26-year-old Gardiel Solario was the officer who was shot and killed. He had only been on the police force for 1 month. He was a rookie cop. And when he was outside of an LA Fitness gym waiting in his vehicle, he was approached by one of the suspects who then proceeded to attempt to rob him. The situation fell apart, and in the end, again, this 26-year-old police officer, rookie cop, was shot and killed. Now, the Los Angeles District Attorney, George Gascon, did a press conference where he addressed the severity of the incident. So let's take a quick look at that.
The defendant got out of a car nearby, approached Officer Solorio with a gun drawn in what appeared to be an attempted robbery. Officer Solorio was in his vehicle. Officer Solorio attempted to flee by backing out of his vehicle when the suspect fired multiple times. The defendant then returned back to the vehicle where a juvenile was behind the wheel, and they fled the scene.
So this was a robbery. And remember what I keep telling you guys about crime. Remember what I keep telling you about poverty and crime. This was a robbery. Again, not defending what he did. He was still in the wrong. But I think it's important that we need to start asking these questions. Why are more people doing this? Why are they having more of the crime rate increasing in Los Angeles and places in California? Why is that happening? Let's go back in.
Today, we'll file 1 count of murder with special circumstances allegations that the murder occurred during the commission of a robbery against Carlos Del Cid.
Carlos Del Cid is the name of the individual who ended up shooting the weapon or firing the weapon and shooting and killing the cop. It's interesting that in that press conference, Gascon mentioned the enhancements that will be added to the charges here because he is not a fan of enhancements, including gun enhancements. So for instance, if someone has committed a crime and while committing that crime, they were in possession of an illegal gun, Gascon does not like to add additional charges related to the illegal gun, which I think is very strange in a state that purports to care so much about gun control. So when you have an opportunity to penalize or prosecute someone who is in possession of an illegal gun, you should maybe take that opportunity, just saying for a second. Now let's get into the details about who Carlos Del Cid is. Carlos Del Cid is, again, just one of the suspects here. There were 2 others who were arrested, one of whom was a 17-year-old who drove the getaway vehicle. Since he's underage, we don't know too many details about him. Those records are sealed. So here's a photo of him, his mugshot, and there.
I just want to chime in here for a second and say, she said the 17-year-old was the one that drove the getaway car. Why would a 17-year-old need to be involved in a robbery? What would push him to do that?
Many mugshots of Carlos Del Cid because he has a lengthy criminal record and was not supposed to be roaming the streets considering his violent criminal record. What do I mean by that? Let's get into the details. Court records show Del Cid was arrested in February of this year. After pleading no contest to 2 felony charges, he was sentenced to 180 days in jail and 4 years formal probation on March 10th. The 20-year-old was actually released the next day for what jail records describe as a short sentence. All right, George Gascon was asked about this, like, what's up with this short sentence? Why didn't your prosecutors, ensure that this guy who committed violent crimes didn't get released the next day after his sentencing? And here's what he had to say. Any questions concerning the actual length of time spent in custody should be directed to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. All right, well, look, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is very problematic. There is evidence of literal gang activity within that department. So when Gascon says maybe you should look at the Sheriff's Department, I'm actually sympathetic to that. So the Sheriff's
and we're supposed to trust them?
Department actually did respond to the press when they asked questions. The Los Angeles County District's attorney dropped 3 of the 5 felony charges. On March 10th of 2022, suspect Del Cid was sentenced to 4 years of formal probation and 180 days in county jail with a credit for 58 days served. It was the district attorney's decision to drop the serious violent felony charges that would have rendered the suspect ineligible for early release. And guess what? I looked into that, and believe it or not, the Sheriff's Department is right. The district attorney's office did allow for a plea deal situation in which the most serious charges pertaining to his violent crimes were dropped. So let's go to.
So this is not something that's new. Plea deals happen all the time. What Anna is not going to mention to you in this video, which I thought was really interesting, she's not going to tell you why they're releasing them early, why they're giving them less time, why they're making these types of plea deals that they're making. But I am going to tell you that. But let's go back in, because this is really interesting.
The Los Angeles Times. And let me be clear, Los Angeles Times loves to carry water for the failed policies that we've been seeing from George Gascon in Los Angeles. They love it. They defend him all the time. But this is what they wrote. Del Cid had previously been arrested December 8th by Los Angeles County deputies from the Lomita Station booking records show. He was cited and released the next day. Records do not show the alleged offense, but it appeared to be a felony level crime. Okay, so we don't know the details of what that felony was, but he was released the next day after committing this felony crime. Okay, great. The Los Angeles Police Department's Harbor Division arrested Del.
I just want to chime in that part right there where she said, hold on.
To be a felony level crime. Okay, so we don't know the details of what that felony was, but he was released the next day after committing this felony crime. Okay.
So they don't know what the details of the felony was, but he was released the next day. So just FYI, just because you have a felony charge doesn't mean you did something violent. Not every felony charge means that it was a violent activity. So just keep that in mind. And she doesn't mention that, but let's go on.
Great. The Los Angeles Police Department's Harbor Division arrested Del Cid on February 10th, and he was charged 5 days later with burglary, domestic violence, assault with a deadly weapon, false imprisonment, and intimidating a witness.
Notice once again, what do you see here? Burglary. So the first crime that she was talking about at the beginning of the video, he committed a robbery. He robbed a police officer, shot and killed him, robbed him. Now We have burglary. Again, who would do that? Who robs people? Who commits why do they do it? Why? Now there's more: domestic violence, assault with a deadly weapon, false imprisonment, intimidating witness, and everything. But why is it happening? We're going to get to it.
The crimes reportedly occurred on February 9th, records show. All right, these crimes are serious. He didn't just get caught with a baggie of pot, okay? He committed violent crimes. And by the way, the 180-day sentence is super short considering there's like kidnapping involved, domestic violence, intimidating a witness. These are serious crimes. Okay, so the initial sentence, 180 days, I would venture to say pretty short. I know there are people on the left that are like, no, not too short, 180 days, too long. Good that he beat up his wife. Okay, I'm embellishing a little bit, but that's how the left comes across when it comes to these types of stories. 180 days, he didn't even serve the 180 days. He was released the next day. On March.
But why?
March 10th, he pleaded no contest to burglary and domestic violence while the other charges were dismissed. A judge in Long Beach sentenced him to 180 days in jail and 4 years of probation, court records show. He was released the morning after that sentence was handed down, having spent a month behind bars, according to Sheriff's Department booking records. So he actually was able to get away with the assault. Assault with a deadly weapon, that charge was dropped as part of the plea deal that was negotiated by the district attorney's office, by the prosecutors. Do you understand that? Why would
Again, plea deals happen all the time, whether it's a violent crime or not.
you drop the most serious charges here? No false imprisonment charges, that was dropped too. No charges for intimidating a witness because that was dropped as well as part of this plea deal. I want to be clear. When I was signing up for criminal justice reform,
here we go.
I thought we were going to do things like reform our prisons. So they're actually, rehabilitating people. I thought we were going to do something about policing. I thought we were going to end qualified immunity. So cops can't get away with shooting down unarmed individuals as they're running away from them. We didn't do that. I thought that we were going to provide funding for actual robust programs that would help non-violent offenders transition back into society so they live full, happy lives. Didn't do that either.
What's funny to me is that she actually thought that was going to happen. No, this is why I continue to say time and time again, this whole reform shit does not work. Reforming doesn't work. We actually already had some type of police reform, and that was body cams. And you see what police officers do with those. They turn them off when they feel like it. And they're not held accountable for turning them off. But it's funny. She actually thought that those things were going to happen. She has a little bit more faith, a little bit more trust in our criminal justice system than I do. Let's go on.
Instead, we're playing this game where we just, by the way, I also never thought that anyone was advocating for the early release of violent criminals, including individuals who have literally been in prison for murdering others. But it turns out California's all about it, and I ain't. I think it's a terrible, terrible way to go about this. This ain't reform. It's all about playing patty cakes with people who are not in any way rehabilitated, who have committed incredibly violent crimes, and in some cases, robbed others of their lives.
So she just told you right there, she admitted to the fact that these individuals, when they're in prison, they are not rehabilitated. Keep that in mind and walk with me here. At the same time, she believes that they should have longer sentences. But if you already know that they're not rehabilitated, having a longer sentence doesn't really change that. So let's say Carlos, who she's talking about, let's say he got 20 years. Okay. He does his time, he does his 20 years, then he's put right back out into society. Then what? Yeah, he's been in prison for 20 years in a system that has not, where there's no rehabilitation at all. So what did he learn the entire time he was in there for those 20 years? So then he gets out of prison, and most likely, not all the time, but most likely, because he already has a record, he's going to struggle to find a job to try to live this honest life, and he'll end up right back where he was. This is why a lot of times people become repeat offenders when they are released, because the system is not designed to rehabilitate them. The system is not designed to make sure that they can actually succeed once they get out of prison. It's not. So they end up going right back into crime because they need to eat to live, and they end up right back in prison. Anna is making an assumption here that is incorrect. And that assumption is that if you serve a longer sentence, that will reduce crime. It does not reduce crime. She believes that by giving them shorter sentences, that actually increases the crime. It doesn't. And we've shown this over and over again. Nick, actually, my comrade on RBN, Nick has explained this multiple times. I highly recommend, if you have not done so, that you need to check out 10 Demands for Justice. They have a website. Nick is one of the co-founders. They explain why crime happens. They explain the problems with the criminal justice system, but they also give you a list of 10 demands that is a solution to fix the problem. Because you see, for everything that Anna is saying in this video, she's not telling you why the crimes are happening. And I can tell you why. Majority of crime is poverty driven. She's not telling you why they're giving them shorter sentences. And I'm going to show you that piece because I think that is very important. Actually, let's pop out of this really quick. We'll come back to it. But I really want you guys to understand why they've been shortening their sentences. So let's go to this part here, and then we'll go back to what Nick has to say. This is in reference to her state, California, that she's complaining about. California's prison population drops sharply, but overcrowding still threatens prisoner health. So you have to understand, the prisons in California are overcrowded. That's the first problem. Here's the second problem that Anna, I'm surprised she did not mention this. This started during 2020. During 2020, the prison population plunged as California authorities took measures against the pandemic. In January 2020, California state prisons held 33% more prisoners than they were designed to hold. Now, they were supposed to hold 122,000 people. By December, only 94,500 were incarcerated, a decrease of 27,500 people. Despite this sharp drop, which dwarfs those made by other states, overcrowding in California prisons remain a threat to prisoners' health. So the fact that, and again, I saw the whole video. The fact that she's not explaining to the audience why they're doing this, why they're shortening the sentences, why they're not giving them longer sentences, why the numbers, why they're letting them out. It was because of the pandemic, because the prisons were overcrowded. This was public information. I found this information. She could find it too. So you have to understand, it wasn't like they're just like, okay, let's just let people go. No, there's no room. They don't have room for them. And we've had this problem for a long time. The prisons here are overcrowded. So this is part of the reason you have overcrowding prisons. And then on top of that, you had a pandemic. The 23% population drop for California prisons stand out in a year when state prison populations plummeted across the nation. Of 29 states with easy accessible data for 2020, decreases ranged from 9% to 26%, a few hundred to many thousand inmates in each state. In total, these states saw a reduction of 125,600 prisoners. California's dropped constituted 22% of that total. Texas had the next largest reduction at 16%. So here's the chart here. I wish I could. Okay, I can make it a little bit bigger. I don't want to overdo it. Okay, here's the chart here. California's prison population declined dramatically in 2020. So look, notice California is leading the pack. They have the most significant drop. After them is Texas, Illinois, Georgia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Ohio, Arizona, the list goes on. And I believe at the bottom is Vermont, which makes sense. So I think this is very important to point out, because it's easy to watch that segment and think, oh, well, they just don't care anymore. The courts don't care. The cops don't care. They're just like, whatever. We're not even going to try to hold this individual accountable to their fullest scale. Like, where are you going to put them? This is a part of the problem. Yes, I'm very well aware of that, Jake, that there are some people that have drug problems. Not everyone that is homeless is on drugs. But yes, I am very well aware of that. And I agree. Yes, we need to get them help. We shouldn't be putting them in prisons. That's the problem. There's no rehabilitation going on here. There's no system here that are really trying to rehabilitate the people once they go into the prison system. There's none. Nobody is teaching them how to be a productive citizen once they get out of prison. So they end up right back in. I believe that's on purpose. Remember, it's a money system. They make money from this. These private prisons, these for-profit prisons, they make money off of this. So it's just, to me, when I listen to Anna's speech here, for a second, I felt like I was listening to Fox News. Like I really did. She goes on a little bit more here. And then I want to show you something else, because this is not the first time where she's made this kind of Karen-esque, statement. She's been heading in this direction, and I'm going to show you in just a second.
And get a load of this Los Angeles Times headline. Amid COVID-19, California releases some inmates doing time for murder. Advocates push to free more. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. I don't believe in the death penalty. But I would say that if you murder someone and you have spent time in a facility.
She had the headline right in front of her, you guys. Look at the headline. Listen.
Push to free more.
She had the headline right in front of her and she didn't dive into it. Why did they do that, Anna? Why did they push to do that during the pandemic? She didn't even tell you.
I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. I don't believe in the death penalty. But I would say that if you murder someone and you have spent time in a facility, in a prison that does not rehabilitate, because that's what our prisons are, it's very unlikely that you're rehabilitated, and just releasing you into the world with no rehabilitation, it's a bad idea, bad idea. More than 63,000 inmates can.
I'm really confused. She just said once again that you're spending time in a facility that has no rehabilitation, and then they release you into the world and you're not rehabilitated. Bad idea. So does Anna think that criminals should stay in jail forever? Because let's be real. With her saying that I thought we'd get some type of criminal justice reform where prisoners will be rehabilitated, that's not happening, Anna. So do you think that those prisoners should stay in prison forever? Because they're not being rehabilitated. Talk to people who are talking to these prisoners. Talk to people like Chris Hedges, who teaches in the prison. They're not, the system is not helping them, is not rehabilitating them. So based on that logic that she just gave you, she don't want them to really get out at all because there's no rehabilitation. Now, this is not the first time. She's been heading this way. She's been heading this way. Now, this was last year. Afeni and I talked about this. I don't see the date on this. I don't know why. Anyway, it was last year. You'll be able to tell the difference. I had a different camera. There was something else she said back then. Let's listen to this. Check it out.
I do think that there are progressives. I don't know if it's progressive policy, but progressives in places like California who have made terrible decisions. And so one of those terrible decisions is essentially doing away with anti-camping laws, right? Allowing people to camp out wherever they want, whenever they want. And if, like, we have a homeless problem in California, we have it all throughout the country, but it's particularly bad in California. And so the argument is, well, if there isn't public housing available for people, they should be allowed to camp out. Okay, but there's also a problem right now where there is public housing available and individuals will say, no, I don't want to take it. I don't want to follow the rules in the public housing. And so as a result, I would rather camp out. Progressive lawmakers are like, we should allow them to camp out. And you know what happens? Crime happens. Open air drug markets happen, and it's the truth. These are the facts of the matter. In fact, it was addressed in this Daily Beast article, and honestly, it was cathartic to read it because everyone denies that this is happening.
You notice how she was talking about the homeless people. Listen to this last piece here. Pay attention to how she talks about them.
Like California, who have made terrible decisions. And so one of those terrible decisions is essentially doing away with anti-camping laws, right? Allowing people to camp out wherever they want, whenever they want. And if, like, we have a homeless problem in California, we have it all throughout the country, but it's particularly bad in California. And so the argument is, well, if there isn't public housing available for people, they should be allowed to camp out. Okay, but there's also a problem right now where there is public housing available and individuals will say, no, I don't want to take it. I don't want to follow the rules in the public housing. And so as a result, I would rather camp out. Progressive lawmakers are like, we should allow them to camp out. And you know what happens? Crime happens. Open air drug markets happen, and it's the truth. These are the facts of the matter. In fact, it was addressed in this Daily Beast article, and honestly, it was cathartic to read it because everyone denies that this is happening.
So Eric just told me this stream was August 3rd of 2021. She was already heading in this direction. I want to remind you too that Jeffrey Katzenberg, the guy who donated that $20 million to TYT, also last year wanted to criminalize homelessness in Los Angeles. They're homeless, they're poor, let's lock them up. Let's lock people up for being homeless. Do you see what's happening here? You see? Yeah, she'll say she's progressive, she'll say she's left and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, come on, there's a class divide here. And she's gonna look out for, let me make sure we gotta protect my community because police protect capital. I told you this before. Nick, my comrade at RBN, hit the nail right on the head. What Anna is doing is particularly egregious because she is doing what right-wingers done for decades, claiming increased incarceration would stop violent crime. We incarcerate more people than anyone in the world. If that were true, we would be the most peaceful society ever. Yes. Nick is correct. He's right. Nick is correct. Nick is right. That's a misconception. If that were the case, our crime rate would decrease. We would be steadily going down. But that's not true. Let's go ahead with the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. What does she mean, we? Like she was in that fight to do all of these reforms? Anna, California is a direct ballot initiative state, meaning after a successful petition, Drive It goes completely around California government and directly on the ballot for Californians to vote on. Unlike Mississippi, Massachusetts, Alaska, Wyoming, Idaho, and Maine, which are indirect, where legislature has a chance to pass it first. If not, then it proceeds to ballot. Start a ballot initiative, Anna. Exactly. I'm gonna go to some of these comments here. Yasmin said, I was just in LA this weekend and there are so many homeless. I had to leave early because it was getting too expensive and I was there for one day. Can't imagine being there for your whole life. Anna, shut the fuck up. Terry says, the cops are worse than the criminals on the streets. Greg says, why do people think that throwing someone with a history of violence into abusive confinement with other people with histories of violence is supposed to make them less violent? That's a good point. JB says, people like Anna attack people who commit crimes, but not why they commit crimes. She's focused on the symptoms and not the cause. Exactly. Saul says, it is cheaper to jail them, to use them as slave labor. That's another one that's true. Yasmin says, Anna needs to fight for that rehabilitation if she knows it's needed, but Anna is not a fighter. She's a serial complainer, as are other bourgeoisie lefties. JB says, when Anna called some of us on the left secret right-wingers, that was pure projection. Who sounds more right? Who sounds more right-wing? More right-wing. I can't talk tonight. Who sounds more right-wing, us or her? Thank you for the super chat, AJF. It takes 30 to 70K per person annually to jail folks. We, taxpayers, pay for that. Rehabilitating folks decreases chances of recidivism. Thank you so much for that. So we have to I really would like to see, and I don't think she'll do this, but I really would like to see Anna Kasparian talk to someone like Nick or Awkward from 10 Demands for Justice about police abolition. Because again, it's a common misconception that people have. They think that if people have longer sentences, then our crime decreases, but it doesn't work that way. In fact, it hasn't been happening all this time. Let me see a private chat here. One more in Rockfin. Let's go. Let's go. Thanks for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Anna, if that is the case and they don't want to follow the rules of public housing, then maybe wouldn't it be a good idea to get out of the studio and do some investigative reporting and find out why? Yes. No, that's a good one. So another thing to bring up as well is that when people say, why don't they just stay in the shelters? Why don't they just stay in the housing units? There's a lot of rules that I know, at least for the homeless shelters, that they have. And if you don't abide by all those rules, that's it. You're out, you're done. And some of the rules are difficult to respect, right? For example, a lot of times homeless shelters have curfew. If you work at night, you may not make that curfew. That's important. I think you need to know that. Not everyone that is homeless doesn't have a job. We have people here in Boston that are homeless that have jobs. They've been evicted and the numbers are increasing. So there are all types of rules. You can't have alcohol. You can't have any, right? They make it difficult. You need to get religion at some shelters, right? Like, I'm not even saying like the rules are incredibly lenient or that the rules are not something that anyone shouldn't want to follow. It's not that simple. The biggest one, like I said, I know some of them, you can't use drugs, you can't have alcohol, but the curfew can get a lot of people too. Because like I said, if you're working a job at night, let's say you wait tables or something like that, right? When I waited tables, I knew someone that worked with me, they were living in their car because they wouldn't live in a shelter because of all the rules. If you're waiting tables at night and you have to close, you're not going to make curfew. So that's important. People need to know that. Terry said public housing. Same thing with public housing. They have a lot of rules. When I went to one of the housing projects in Roxbury recently, they have a lot of rules. There's certain things they can't do, like certain things they can't say. And it's strict. It's not that simple. Lucky Burrito said, I worked at a homeless shelter. The people used to say they felt like they were in jail. Yeah. And think about it this way as well. What if you're homeless and you have a child? So many things, so many things. But no, that was a good comment. Maybe she should go out there and find out why. Do some reporting on the ground. Leave the studio and find out why people aren't willing to go into those places. And at some places, there's wait lists. I know people, they'll tell you with some of the Section 8 housing, there's like 3-5 year wait lists. So what are you supposed to do until then? I don't know.